the scenario for everyone. Let's suppose a company has a distributed workforce, the employees working from home or traveling. These employees need secure access to resources hosted in Azure. Or it could be a development team is working on a project that requires occasional access to Azure resources like databases or app services. Right. We could think of another scenario like a small organization migrating some on-premises workload to Azure. Only a few IT admins need access or secure access to Azure resources to monitor and manage the migration. Right. So, what is common in all these scenarios? They are people who are accessing Azure resources from outside your environment. Right. So, just to understand, let's suppose we have this Azure Virtual Network, okay, Azure VNet, and we have multiple resources running here, okay. And let's suppose we do have on-premises here. This is our on-premises environment. If you are following the series, you know when we need to connect on-prem to Azure through VPN, there is a VPN tunnel over the internet that is an encrypted tunnel, right? And to perform that, we must have something called gateway, VPN gateway on its dedicated subnet. Okay, gateway. This part is all clear. We have done the lab and everything in previous videos. Now, in this, all the scenarios that I've talked about, including this one, let's suppose an organization has outsourced application maintenance to a vendor who needs occasional access to specific Azure resources. So what exactly is happening? There are people for any reason who are actually accessing your resources from outside your network, neither on premises, which is connected through VPN, or inside the Azure, but somewhere, right? And it could be any reason, as I gave you a couple of scenarios. And these users are called remote users, like work from home users, right? Remote, this guy is also remote, and they need to access your Azure Virtual Network securely, right? You understand? Securely. So that secure connection is called point to site VPN connection to the gateway. All right. So if I have to define it, point to site, this allows you to securely connect your laptop, as you see, your desktop, or maybe your phone, okay, your mobile device, to Azure Virtual Network securely. Unlike site-to-site VPN, which connects the entire network, as you can see here, this entire site is connected. So all the resources inside this site can connect directly through this VPN. They don't need not to have their own point to site configuration done, or right. So this is the difference. And this point to site is also useful solution apart from all those scenarios. Let's suppose you have not the entire site to connect, you can simply use point to site rather using the site to site VPN. Right, now let's see how it works. That's the most important part, right? So how it works, there is this client device, okay? This initiates a VPN request, VPN connection using a VPN client. Let's say there's a VPN client, and Azure VPN gateway, this guy right here, handles the connection authentication and allows the secure access to resources within Azure Virtual Network. So we need a client here, a VPN client, which initiate the request, and here is the gateway. Now there is a couple of things that we should be aware of in this whole scenario. For example, the communication will happen through some protocols. So we should be aware of those protocols, when to use what protocol, what are the different protocols it supports. And then we talked about authentication, because only then it will allow to get in, There are multiple ways to authenticate this point to site VPN connection, and we'll see what are those and when to use which one, right? So if we talk about protocols, before I do that, let me show you this guy right here, the VPN gateway we have created in previous videos. If we go to the VPN gateway, we have this point to site configuration right here. If you click here, there is one option called configure now. If you click on configure now, here we need to provide the address pool. Address pool is what? The private range of private IP addresses which will be assigned to your client. If I go back to my diagram, so under point to site configuration, you will have a different CIDR range. For example, here we have 10.1.0.0 slash 16 maybe, and when the virtual network is 10.0.0.0 slash 16. So these both are non-overlapping IP addresses. So this gateway will assign the IPs from this to these clients. For example, this client will get 10.1, that's the network address, then 0.4, right? Not from this, and only then they will go and connect. So that's the address pool here. Now there are multiple tunnel type, which means different protocols that they are using, like OpenSSL, SSTP, IKEv2. So let's understand these protocol first. So the very first protocol we saw is IKEv2, which is Internet Key Exchange and version 2. As you see, it's Internet Key Exchange. So this IKEv2 protocol based on IPsec suite designed to secure communication over internet. Why? Because they are exchanging the key securely, right? This preferred for devices supporting VPN clients like Windows, Mac, and iOS. So we can think this IKEv2 as a negotiator for setting up a secure tunnel between your device and Azure. Between your device and Azure. Okay, how exactly it happens? Because IKEv2 negotiate encryption rules and exchange keys, because that's what the name is, key exchange. It will negotiate, it's a very important point, negotiate encryption rules and exchange keys, okay, with Azure. This ensures both sides agrees on how to protect the data. Now, once both sides agrees, a secure tunnel is created. This tunnel is like a private road. This tunnel is like a private road that only your data can travel on. All right, so it will negotiate the encryption rules first and then exchange the keys. And now it's a tunnel, a private road from where you can share your data, encrypted data. Now, all data sent through the tunnel is encrypted, right? That's the definition of VPN. We are talking about encrypted data, right? So that's what IKEv2. Now, there is one more thing which is important. This IKEv2 is mobility friendly. If your device switches networks, this is very important point we should write here so that we can define at the end, mobility friendly. So if your device switches networks like from Wi-Fi to mobile data, IKEv2 keeps the tunnel intact without breaking the connection. You might have seen that. If you have, you can comment. If you have not, keep observing, you'll find some. All right, the second protocol we saw was OpenVPN. OpenVPN, which is open source SSL TLS based VPN. It is open source SSL TLS based VPN, which is offering strong security, and the main part is cross platform compatibility. Yes, it offers cross-platform compatibility, which is the unique feature that will help you to decide which protocol to use. It's ideal for cross-platform support like Windows, Mac, Linux, and mobiles. All right. So how Open VPN works like a secure courier. Yes. The other one, this was a negotiator because it's negotiating the rules first, and this is acting as a secure courier. You have sent a lot of courier, right? So just keep that analogy in mind. So using SSL TLS technology, the same used by the HTTPS websites, to ensure safety or safe delivery of your data, right? That's what it uses and perform the secure courier. How exactly? When you connect OpenVPN, it verifies that you and Azure can trust each other, like showing ID before entering a building. So what happens? Authentication. What happens? Authentication. Let me write it down. Authentication. This is what happens first. Authentication. Now, OpenVPN creates a secure tunnel by encrypting your data with SSL TLS, ensuring that no one else can see what you are sending or receiving. After authentication, what happens? Encryption of tunnel. Encrypted tunnel gets created to send encrypted data. And I have mentioned cross platform compatibility. So, this is a wonderful thing. It is like a universal courier. It works with many operating systems, as I mentioned, Windows, Mac, Linux, etc. Now, one more important thing is OpenVPN can use port 443 because HTTPS I mentioned, normally used by websites. So, it easily passes through most firewalls and network connection restrictions. So, your cybersecurity team is pretty happy, like you're not asking them to open some ports and protocols, right? So this is what, oh, come here. So this is what open VPN protocol is. Now the third one we saw, there was if you're guessing SSTP, you are correct, which is secure socket tunneling protocol. If spelling it out correct, but doesn't matter. You can hear me. It's SSTP, Secure Socket Tunneling Protocol, which is like a legacy option for Windows only environment. So that is one of the criteria that you can choose if you have only a Windows environment. Okay, and because it is Microsoft branded VPN protocol based on HTTPS on for secure transmission, usually for legacy support. I should mention here legacy support. All right. Now, how exactly it works? Well, this SSTP, this creates a tunnel over port 443. It's again uses the same because I have mentioned HTTPS, the same port used by websites. I've mentioned that, right? So it can pass through firewall easily, just like OpenVPN. Now, all the data traveling through this tunnel is encrypted, ensuring security. And SSTP works only on Windows device, taking advantages of built-in system features, right? So if you have this, then you have to choose this one. All right, so these are some protocols that we talked about. Now, before we go ahead, what to choose when, let's also see some other stuff like this. Tunnel type we have done. The authentication type, we have Azure Certificate, Radius Authentication, and Azure Active Directory. We have three kinds of authentication type as well. Let's go through these types one by one. So we are done with these protocols. Let's start here. So what are we doing? We are learning authentication type. And what are authentication type for Azure point to site? The very first is certificate authentication, which is Azure Certificate Authentication. The first one is Azure Certificate Authentication. Now, what about it? Well, this is a method that uses client certificate, which means we have to install this client certificate on our devices. And why we are installing the certificate? Because this certificate will will go and authenticate itself. You are getting authenticated with this client certificate, right? So how this guy is knows this is our certificate, because we are also installing root certificate there. So a certificate act like a digital ID card that proves the device's user identity, right? Okay. Now, how exactly it works? If we have to go through this, the Azure issues a root certificate and stores it securely, right? Because if I go there, right here, if I choose, uh, not we'll learn these later. Azure certificate, you see root certificate. We have to provide the root certificate here, and this root certificate, and we will create the client certificate with the help of root certificate, so that this root certificate is aware like these are my childs. So when a user connects the device presents its client certificate to Azure, and Azure verifies that certificate against its trusted root certificate. Here we will have trusted root certificate, root certificate, root certificate. That's how it works. This is our Azure certificate authentication method. It is like a digital key card. Only people with the key, with the right key card or client certificate can enter the secure facility. Doesn't matter what protocol they are using, whatever is applicable to that particular scenario, but that's how it will be authenticated. Now, the second method of authentication is let's say Azure Active Directory. We all know Azure Active Directory is a wonderful service for IAM. A modern authentication method uses Azure AD credentials, right? It's a modern authentication method, supports multiple protocols as well. So how exactly it works? The user, this guy right here, this opens its client that we talked about at the beginning. Now, earlier we installed certificate as well for the authentication. Now, the client here, we open the client, and it initiates a connection. Client initiates a connection, it will redirect to Azure Active Directory. Let's suppose here we have Azure Active Directory. This is our AD, not AD, Azure AD or Entra ID. So the request that this guy initiate, this client initiate, comes here, and it will redirect it to Azure Active Directory. Now this Azure Active Directory will give the user login screen for you and redirects to, and this user login will ask you for ID and password. Once the ID password is cleared, or maybe MFA is required, because these are the features of Azure AD, you can utilize those. Azure AD verifies the credentials and sends a authentication token. Now this will send the authentication token to the client. Okay, once this client receives the token, uh, this will present VPN client uses this token to establish secure connection with Azure. Again, this will present it to gateway, and now they are happy. So that's how they are authenticating. So think of it like a checking into a hotel. How? Because your ID, your Azure AD credential is verified at the front desk, which is Azure AD. And you have given a key card, which is authentication token, to access your room, if you like the analogy. All right. So client set was, if you remember, digital key card. Okay. Let me remove the red color. Not so happening. So key card. Whosoever has the key card, it will get into the room. And Azure AD of hotel. Sorry, I got lost. All right. Now, the third way of authentication is Radius server. Now, Radius server, which is remote authentication dial-in user service. This is what the Radius server is. Remote authentication dial-in user service authentication. This is a protocol that uses an external radius server for authentication and authorization of VPN users. And this radius server validates users against a database or directory like Active Directory, which is it is usually used with the Active Directory, like on-premises Active Directory, where you have hybrid environment and you want to have the control on premises. You deploy the radius server, so it verifies and authenticate through the Active Directory. And how exactly it works? The user connects the VPN, and the VPN server forwards authentication request to the radius server. And the radius server checks the user's credential against the directory or database. If the credentials are valid, the radius server notifies the VPN server, allowing the connection. And the VPN connection is then established securely. And if we need to talk about analogy just to understand what it is like a secure checkpoint that calls a central office, which is your radius server, to verify your credential before letting you through. So we can say it's like checkpoint, which is your radius server. So these are different protocols. These are, sorry, authentication method. These are different protocols that we should be aware for point to site. Now let's get back to the configuration. Now, if you choose Azure certificate, we need to give the root certificate you can create from the authority by yourself for your lab through PowerShell. Uh, Radius server, you need to give the information of your radius authentication. Primary server, you need to give your ID password and it will help you authenticate. And if you talk about Active Directory, then you need to give the information of your Active Directory, your tenant and things like that. Right. Now, the point is, if you need to choose, there must be certain criteria to choose, right? So let's see quickly how to choose which protocol and which authentication we should use. Or let's do that in the next video, otherwise it will be too much. I hope it was informative, and I'll give you the guidance for the lab so that you can perform the lab in the next video. Thank you for watching, and you guys have a wonderful day. Bye bye.